right, everybody, I'm back. We're going to talk about Hell's Angel legend from the South. It's a Little Joe Sinker. It's not little, it's Little Joe, Lil Joe. And I used to bust his balls, and so did David. I call him Little Joe sometimes, and he'd get pissed off at me, and we'd go back and forth over the years. He'd make fun of something I do or whatever. But just remember that. Don't call him Little Joe. It's Lil Joe. He was a Dago member, and he came up to Berdoo, spent a lot of years there. Joe was one of the Raggedy Wranglers, and that was the South's answer to the Filthy Few. I've talked about that before. And what you have to understand, the people I came around were one percenters, a part of that one percenter family, the question marks, the Satan slaves, and then the Hells Angels. And I want you to know that we were very hard on each other, especially in the beginning of relationships, building people, kind of testing people's mettle all the time. And Joe probably was one of the hardest guys I ever ran across. And I remember old man John said to me initially, he said, watch Joe from Berdoo. He's watch his words, be careful what he says to you. Because, like I said, you're always in a test with these older hardcore guys. And I'll give you a perfect example. There was a prospect, a Japanese guy named Steve in Los Angeles, and Joe wanted to go back out to Berdoo, and he said to Steve, and some of you guys are going to think this is harsh, but that was just the nature of things. It was kind of in good fun. If you let your guard down, you got caught with your pants down, well, shame on you. But Joe said, hey, let me use your bike, man. I want to go to Berdoo. And Steve made the mistake of saying, oh, you can have it. And so Joe took it to Berdoo and sold it. And, Joe felt that was a life lesson for Steve. I mean, Steve never forgave him, and now Steve had a problem. Steve had to go deal with Joe, and, it took him a couple of years to straighten it out. He finally eventually made, I was a member by then, but he had made Prospect, and then he got ran off again. So it was a rough time to be around. You better watch your words. You better be on your toes as to what you say, because there was a lot of guys like Joe around. Now, some of you may think that's harsh, but that was just all part of the lesson. Lessons we were learning at the time. I'll give you a perfect example from my personal experience. I had been in Los Angeles, came up quick, made vice president and later president, then took the charter up to Ventura. 1978, in the middle of 78, and we were trying to build a charter there. And there was a guy that, and I'm going to say, I think he may have been a Diablo, but I don't know that for a fact. He was in a club, but I can't remember what. His name was Billy St. James, and he kind of had his own reputation. And he wanted to come around the club. He used to come to the clubhouse all the time. And the problem Billy St. James had was Billy St. James was a Berdoo prospect at one point in time. For whatever reason, went to jail or misstep, I don't know. He wound up not making it. He went to jail, came back, and never really picked up where he left off. And I got Berdoo to release him. That's what you have to do. If you're a prospect in one charter and you want to go on to another charter, you've got to get a release from that charter. And nobody had a problem with Billy St. James coming to Ventura, but I couldn't get a straight answer out of Joe. And, initially I thought Joe had a problem with Billy St. James, but the problem it wasn't really a problem. Joe was testing me. He wanted to see how I was going to handle it. So he'd tell me, tell St. James to go to this payphone and I'll call him. One of the things you learn, too, as a Hells Angel member and prospect back in the 70s, you never gave out anybody's address, you never gave out anybody's phone number, and you never made commitments for anybody. So Joe didn't want me to give St. James his number, and Joe was running us all over San Bernardino. He'd have St. James go out there, and he wouldn't be there, or he'd tell him to go to a payphone, and he wouldn't call him. So I finally got fed up, and I gave St. James Billy's home phone number. I knew I was taking a chance. And the next officers meeting up in Oakland, man, little Joe was there waiting for me. And I walked in there. It was right before the meeting started. And, I've been around a while now. I've seen a few fights in the OM, officers meeting when I say OM. And little Joe stormed up to me and just started motherfucking me. And I started motherfucking him back. Uh, Said, what are you doing giving St. James my number? And I said, what are you doing playing fucking games with me? He goes, I was playing games with him. And I go, no, you're playing games with me. It's a reflection on me. So him and I went toe to toe, kind of had some members gather around us, waiting for us to throw blows. No way was I going to disrespect Joe by picking a fight with a 10-year member. I'd give him the option to throw the first punch. And that's the way it was back in those days. Somebody squares off, you let them throw the first punch. If you get knocked down, they help you up, or they wait till you get up. But nothing happened, and from that point on, Joe fell in love with me, if you will. I'm being a smart ass now, but Joe and I started building this bond, and it was slow but sure. And he started hanging out with Ventura. I guess he liked my style, that I wouldn't back down, and that I even kind of turned the tables on him. And Joe and David Ortega became very, very close. And I did as well, but not as close as Joe and David. And in 1986, when I got arrested by the FBI, I spent a year in Terminal Island. Joe stepped right in. We were a new fledgling charter. There was no leadership there. There was no direction there. And Joe stepped in, wound up renting a house in Ventura for many years, and became a resident part-time up in Ventura. But Joe picks up the torch for me, takes over the charter, keeps everybody in the same direction. This brought a lot of heat on Joe, and cops raided his house. The day I took the stand, they raided a bunch of houses in Southern California. Joe's being one of them, the Hells Angel Clubhouse being another, the Berdoo Clubhouse. They said that I was running a gambling operation, and just to get bad publicity for me when I took the stand. I took the stand in my own defense. But, part of the problem was they killed Joe's dog going into his house. And, Joe got right on the news that night, talked about them shooting his dog, talked about them lying about him being a felon. Like I said, Joe it all fell in play with what was going on. We were getting great headlines. Ultimately, I got found not guilty, came home. Joe is now a resident of Ventura, but he just never officially transferred to Ventura. And I was told the reason he didn't do that was because his ex-wife lived very close by, and they'd been battling for years. And so I never pushed the issue. But, in my heart, I think maybe I wish he would have transferred to Ventura. He was a very, very generous brother. He was so generous, man, just unbelievable. But he had to outdo you. He was generous to the point where if you left a $5 tip, he would throw down another 10. I mean, he had to outdo you with everything. If you him and I went out of state one time together, and he wouldn't let me pay for anything. And I found out on the way, he'd go 60, and I'd go 60 with him. And then he'd bump it up 5 miles an hour. Then I'd catch up to him. Then he'd bump it up another 5 miles. You just couldn't outdo little Joe. He wanted to do one up on you. So I finally figured it out. Well, I'll travel about 70, 75 and just let him be a tire in front of me. But he was on the cutting edge of a lot of stuff. He became very good friends with Andy from Ventura, who was doing all the jewelry for us. Had some Berdoo pins made. Had a Andy lighter made, and just really, really cool guy. And went on the run a couple of times. I know he showed up in front of the clubhouse one time on a crotch rocket, and he was out there revving his motor up. And I went out there to tell the guy, whoever he was, to get the fuck out of the street. He was just being an asshole. and Joe lifted the visor up on the full face helmet. It was Joe. He was riding a crotch rocket around. The cops weren't looking for someone on a crotch rocket. They were looking for Joe on his bike. But I can't remember exactly when, but I'm going to say the mid 90s, early 90s. He started HA Leather, and the business was struggling at first. And then it started taking off, man. He was making great leather cuts, leather jackets, and whatnot. I think David Ortega helped him with the initial patterns. He was doing cuts initially, and then he expanded to jackets. And out of nowhere, Sonny comes back and takes exception with Joe using the name H.A. Leather. That's what the label said, H.A. Leather. And Sonny got so incensed about it, he came down to Berdoo, and he was just in an OM talking shit to Joe. And one of the things that pissed me off about that, I'm going to show you here. Here's a book. Some of you can see. Can you see the death head on it? The same time Sonny was bitching about Little Joe's leather, it wasn't even Hell's Angels leather, it was H.A. Leather. Some people called it Howl's Leather, H-A-L, Howl Leather. But Sonny had this book out, and I confronted Sonny in a meeting. I go, why are you selling this book, Ralph, with the death head on it? And he said he'd never seen it before. And of course, me being me, I opened it up and I said, well, how'd your signature get here, Ralph? And so this was part of the argument and part of the friction between the North and the South. So Little Joe used this as an example, I believe. And they wound up arguing. They went outside and squared off. Sonny kicked Joe. Joe kicked him back. And then they stood there squared off for a couple of minutes, and Ralph just turned around and walked away. Joe turned around and walked away. I said to Joe, I go, what was that like? And he goes, like fighting your dad. I kind of got a kick out of it. So that's some of the information about Joe. The end was very tragic and sad. On the end, he went back to Dago, transferred back to Dago from Berdoo. And I was told some younger, disrespectful members were ransacking his coffin when he died. I wasn't there. I don't know if it's true. I've heard it from more than one source. They wanted to get his Andy lighter. They wanted to get his rings off of him. He had some of his dog's ashes in the coffin with him. And he had a small bottle of patchouli oil. I don't know if some of you guys might even know what the hell that is. That's something from the 60s. Joe always had patchouli oil. And I used to call him Patchouli Joe once in a while, and he'd get mad at me for that. But, that was a sad end. I don't know what happened to his stuff. I don't know if they actually got it out of there. And I guess the thought was some of these people wanted to take the stuff. They said there was no reason for that stuff to go in the ground with Joe. Well, the reason was that's what Joe wanted. And if that's what Joe wanted, that's what Joe should have got. And I saw that happen to another individual. I'm not going to get into it in this particular video. But, if a brother wants specific things done after his death, we have an obligation to adhere to it and follow through with it. So, to the people that were pilfering Little Joe's stuff, I don't know what to say to you, man. You guys ought to be ashamed of yourselves. And I wanted to bring this to everybody's attention. This is a Hell's H.A. coat. It's got a label here, H-A-L, Hal, Hell's Angels leather. It's got a great lining to it, inside pocket and whatnot. Joe made this and got it to me. It's got the softest leather. It came to me broke in. But every time I wear it, I think about Joe. I get a couple of laughs about some of the trials and tribulations I had personally with him. I don't know who I'll do next. I'll come up with somebody. Throw me some names out there, and I'll try to put something together for you. Now, if you tell me to do something and I don't do it right away, give me time. I got a lot of things going on, but I'll try to get to it and try to answer your questions and whatnot. So everybody have a happy holiday, and if you can get one of these HA coats, the original ones have a big label on the inside with flames around it. But these coats are really, really nice. They're really comfortable, and they fit really well. So you can look up Little Joe's Legacy. I think it's Lil Joe's Leather, Little Joe's Legendary Leather on Instagram. And you can actually order something from him and get yourself some quality stuff. Okay, that's it on Little Joe. Happy holidays, everybody. Next week, we've got Last American Outlaw coming, part 1, 2, and 3. It's a documentary about my 2011 case and how it started out to be a documentary of interviews, and then I got indicted, and what goes from there. But it's going to be in 3 parts next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I think. So it'll fall, the second half will fall on Christmas Day. So after you open your presents, open up that on YouTube. Please subscribe, comment, and like. I appreciate it very much. Okay, I'll see you, everybody.